The fence post shook in my hand as the roar of engines grew louder. I planted my feet firmly on my own soil, watching as a convoy of ATVs crested the hill. The woman leading them, her designer sunglasses reflecting the afternoon sun, brought her vehicle to an abrupt halt just feet from where I stood. Her perfectly highlighted hair barely moved as she removed her helmet and looked down at me with a smile that never reached her eyes. "You must be the new owner," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I am Karen Mitchell, president of Lakeside Estates Homeowners Association." She gestured to the wooden post in my hand. "I hope you are not planning to obstruct our community trail." I glanced down at the "No Trespassing" sign I was about to install, then back at the deep tire tracks cutting across my meadow, through my vegetable garden, and toward the creek I had fallen in love with when purchasing this property. "This is private property," I stated firmly. Her smile vanished instantly. "Let me explain something to you," she said, leaning forward on her handlebars. "You have no idea who you are dealing with. This is not a fight you want to start." That was the moment I realized this was not about a trail. This was war. I remember the first time I saw this property. The real estate agent had nearly gotten lost on the way there, turning down 3 unmarked dirt roads before finally stopping at an overgrown driveway. "This is it," she said apologetically, clearly expecting my disappointment. Instead, I stepped out of the car and felt something I had not felt in years: peace. The land stretched out before me like something from a dream. 5 acres of mixed woodland and meadow with a small creek running through the eastern edge. Ancient oak trees provided dappled shade, their branches reaching toward a sky untouched by city lights. The meadow grasses swayed in the gentle breeze, untamed and perfect. I closed my eyes and heard nothing but birds, insects, and the distant murmur of water over stones. "No neighbors for nearly a mile," the agent explained, warming to her pitch now that she saw my interest. "No building restrictions, no homeowners association, complete freedom." Those words, complete freedom, echoed in my mind for months as I worked overtime, cut expenses, and saved every penny. City life had slowly suffocated me with its noise, regulations, and constant supervision. Here was a chance to live by my own rules on my own land. After years of planning and 15 years of working in a windowless office, I finally had enough for the down payment. The first month on my property was everything I had dreamed it would be. I woke with the sun, spent hours exploring the woods, and fell asleep to the chorus of crickets and frogs. My small cabin, positioned to maximize the view of both sunrise and sunset, became my sanctuary. I planted a vegetable garden near the creek and spent evenings on my porch planning future projects. This was the life I had sacrificed so much to achieve. I noticed the tire tracks on a Tuesday morning. They cut through the eastern meadow in a clear path, crushing the wildflowers I had been documenting in my nature journal. At first, I thought perhaps it was the previous owner checking something he had forgotten, or maybe a utility worker reading meters. The tracks led from the road to the creek, crossed it at a shallow point, and continued into the woods toward the distant development I could occasionally glimpse through the trees. That weekend brought the answer. I was drinking coffee on my porch when I heard them. The mechanical growl of engines shattered the morning stillness, sending birds scattering from the trees. 4 ATVs emerged from the woods, their riders laughing and shouting as they roared across my meadow, splashed through my creek, and disappeared toward the road. The pattern continued and worsened. Each weekend brought more riders, more noise, more damage. Deep ruts appeared in the soft ground near the creek. Empty beer cans occasionally littered the trail. The deer I had grown accustomed to seeing at dawn stopped appearing. My sanctuary was becoming a highway. Then came the Saturday when I saw her for the first time. Leading a group of 5 other riders was a woman on a brand new ATV that gleamed in the sunlight. Unlike the others, she wore what appeared to be carefully coordinated outdoor gear, not the practical kind, but the expensive type sold in luxury outdoor catalogs. Her laugh carried across the meadow as she gunned the engine through a puddle, sending mud spraying over a patch of black-eyed Susans I had been protecting. I stood motionless on my porch, coffee cup frozen halfway to my lips, as they crossed my property without a second glance toward my cabin. The woman never slowed, never indicated any awareness that she was trespassing. She simply acted as if she owned the place. The pit that formed in my stomach told me what my mind already knew. The peaceful life I had worked so hard to create was under threat, and this was only the beginning. The next morning, I spread the property documents across my kitchen table. The land survey showed clear boundaries. My property extended from the county road all the way to the ridge line, encompassing the creek and a significant portion of the woodland beyond it. There was no question about it. The ATV trail cut directly through the heart of my land. No easements were listed. No access rights granted to any neighboring properties or developments. I decided a direct approach would be best. These people might not even realize they were trespassing. Perhaps the previous owner had granted informal permission that they assumed would continue. A simple, polite conversation might resolve everything before it became a real problem. The following Saturday, I positioned myself at the point where the trail crossed from the neighboring property onto mine. I wore my most approachable outfit and rehearsed a friendly but firm speech. Around mid-morning, the familiar sound of engines announced their arrival. I raised my hand in greeting as the lead rider approached. She slowed her ATV and the others followed suit. When she removed her helmet, I recognized her as the woman from the previous weekend. Up close, I could see her perfectly highlighted hair, manicured nails, and the subtle logo of an expensive brand on her jacket. "Good morning," I called out, raising my voice over the idling engines. "I am the new owner of this property. I wanted to introduce myself." The woman looked me over with an expression I could not quite decipher, not quite hostile, but certainly not friendly. "Karen Mitchell," she finally replied, "president of Lakeside Estates Homeowners Association." She gestured toward the distant development. "We are just passing through on our community trail." "That is actually why I wanted to speak with you," I said, maintaining my friendly tone. "I have reviewed my property documents, and this trail crosses directly through my land. I was not aware of any agreement with the previous owner." Karen's expression hardened. "This trail has been used by our community for years. It is an established recreational route. I understand that you may have used it before, but legally speaking—" "Legally speaking," she interrupted, "established use creates certain rights. Our community has invested in maintaining this trail system. We hold annual rides that bring significant tourism dollars to the area." I noticed the other riders watching silently from their vehicles. Their expressions ranged from bored to mildly amused, as if they had seen this confrontation play out before. "I have checked the documents thoroughly," I explained. "There are no easements or right-of-way agreements on record. While I understand you have been using this path, it does cross private property." Karen shifted on her ATV seat, her smile now clearly forced. "Look, I understand you are new to the area. Things work differently in rural communities than they do in the city. Neighbors respect traditions and community needs." "I am all for being a good neighbor," I assured her. "But good neighbors also respect boundaries and property rights." Something in Karen's expression changed. The forced smile disappeared, replaced by something colder. The previous owner never had an issue with our community activities. In fact, he was grateful for our presence. It kept his property values up and discouraged vandalism. I spoke with him during the purchase process, I countered. He mentioned occasionally allowing hunters to cross during deer season, but nothing about regular ATV traffic. Karen's laugh held no humor. He would say that during the sale, would he not, to avoid complications. She leaned forward slightly, her voice lowering. Let me give you some friendly advice. This community has deep roots. The people who live in lakeside estates include county commissioners, judges, business owners. We support local candidates and projects. You do not want to make enemies here over something so trivial as people enjoying nature. The threat was barely veiled. The other riders had fallen completely silent, watching the exchange with interest now. I appreciate your perspective, I said carefully, but I need to consider the environmental impact and liability issues. Karen straightened up and replaced her helmet. Consider carefully. Being difficult about community access can make life very unpleasant for newcomers. Permit approvals, service calls, social invitations, small towns have long memories. With that, she signaled to the others and accelerated forward, driving directly onto my property without another word. The group followed, engines roaring louder than necessary as they passed. I stood alone at my property line, the dust from their tires settling around me. Her parting words echoed in my head. It was not advice, it was a warning. Over the next few days, I installed a series of no trespassing signs along my property line. Not the flimsy paper kind, but proper metal signs secured to wooden posts driven deep into the ground. I placed them at regular intervals, making sure they were clearly visible from the trail. This seemed like a reasonable compromise. I was not physically blocking access yet, just clearly communicating my property rights. 3 days later, I walked my boundary line to check on the signs. They were gone. Every single one vanished. Only the empty posts remained, looking strangely vulnerable in the afternoon light. I felt a cold wave of anger wash over me. This was not a misunderstanding anymore. This was deliberate. That evening, I ordered wildlife trail cameras from an online retailer. They arrived 2 days later, and I installed them strategically, not just along the trail, but covering the signposts as well. I disguised them carefully, using natural materials and positioning them where they would not be easily spotted. Then I replaced all the missing signs and waited. I did not have to wait long. The following weekend brought the familiar sound of ATVs. From my window, I watched Karen leading another group across my meadow. This time, she slowed near one of my signs, studied it for a moment, then continued on her way. I thought perhaps she had decided to respect the posted notice. I was wrong. The footage from my trail cameras told a different story. Later that same day, Karen returned alone. The camera captured her parking her ATV next to one of my signs. She looked around carefully, then grabbed the sign and wrenched it from the post. She did not discard it nearby but loaded it onto her vehicle. The camera followed her to the next sign where she repeated the process. Systematic removal, not random vandalism. The other cameras showed similar scenes. Sometimes Karen herself, sometimes other riders I recognized from her group. By Monday, every sign had been removed again. The message was clear. My property rights meant nothing to them. That week brought another escalation. A letter arrived in my mailbox, printed on expensive stationery with the Lakeside Estates HOA logo prominently displayed at the top. The language was formal, almost legal in tone, demanding that I cease and desist from obstructing community access to the established recreational trail system. It claimed that decades of uncontested use had created an implied easement that I was legally bound to honor. The letter was signed by Karen Mitchell, HOA president, and copied to the Lakeside Estates Legal Committee. It concluded with a thinly veiled threat about the HOA being prepared to take all necessary steps to protect community interests and property values. I took the letter to a local attorney, a woman named Margaret whose office was located in the county seat. She reviewed the documents while I waited anxiously. "This is nonsense," she said finally, placing the letter down on her desk. "Legally speaking, you are completely within your rights to restrict access to your property. There is no recorded easement, and implied easements require very specific conditions that simply do not exist in your case." Relief washed over me, so their claim has no merit. Margaret's expression was cautious. "Legally, no, practically speaking, this could get complicated." She leaned forward. "I know Karen Mitchell. She has a reputation in this county." "What kind of reputation?" "The kind that comes from having a husband on the county commission and a brother-in-law in the sheriff's department. The kind that comes from hosting fundraisers for judges and making large donations to local campaigns." My heart sank. So even though I am legally in the right, I might still lose. Margaret shook her head. "I did not say that. I said it could get complicated. But if you are asking if I will take your case if it comes to that, absolutely. I have been waiting for someone to stand up to that woman for years." That evening, I searched online for information about Lakeside Estates and their HOA. What I found was illuminating. Community forums contained numerous complaints about aggressive HOA tactics. Former residents described feeling pressured to sell when they ran afoul of Karen or her board. Local business owners mentioned subtle threats about losing community business if they did not support certain initiatives. One post particularly caught my attention. "Tried to block their ATV access across my south pasture. Suddenly had 3 different county agencies inspecting my barns and well. Coincidence? I think not. Ended up selling to a developer who rezoned immediately. Karen's husband abstained from the vote but sure seemed happy about the outcome." The pattern was clear. Karen and her associates used a combination of legal intimidation, political connections, and social pressure to get their way. They had done it before, and they were trying to do it to me now. I printed the most relevant forum posts and added them to a file folder labeled Evidence. Something told me I would need it. The peaceful life I had sought was now fully disrupted, but retreating was not an option. This land represented everything I had worked for. I would not be bullied off of it. Despite the growing conflict, I held out hope that the situation might de-escalate. I replaced the signs once more, this time adding small, visible notices that the area was under video surveillance. Perhaps this would discourage further vandalism. It did not. The weekend brought not just Karen and her usual group, but what appeared to be an organized event. From my porch, I counted more than 20 ATVs crossing my property in a single afternoon. They moved in groups of 4 or 5, with Karen's distinctive vehicle often leading the way. Many carried coolers and camping gear, suggesting they planned to spend the day somewhere beyond my property. The weather that weekend did not help matters. A spring storm had left the ground soft and muddy. The parade of heavy vehicles carved deep channels through my meadow, creating a muddy scar across the landscape. Near the creek, where the ground was particularly saturated, the damage was even worse. The banks were collapsing in places, sending sediment into the water. The once clear creek now ran murky and brown. I decided direct confrontation was necessary again. I approached a group of riders as they paused near my property line. "Excuse me," I called out over the idling engines. This is private property, and those signs clearly indicate no trespassing. A man in his 40s, wearing an expensive riding jacket similar to Karen's, looked me over with obvious disdain. Karen said to ignore those. She is handling the situation with the appropriate authorities. What does that mean, handling the situation? I asked. The man shrugged. She said your signs are illegal and the county will be forcing you to remove them. Something about obstructing a public access trail. There is no public access trail here, I insisted. This is private property with no easements or rights of way. The riders exchanged glances. A woman in the group laughed. That is not what Karen told us. She said you are just being difficult because you are not from around here. They drove away before I could respond, deliberately accelerating hard enough to spray mud across my clothes. I stood there, humiliated and increasingly angry, watching them destroy more of my land. That night, I received the first phone call. My number is unlisted, so it was disturbing to hear an unfamiliar voice on the line. We have been using that trail for decades, the male voice said without introduction. You need to back off before things get unpleasant. Who is this? I demanded. The line went dead. 20 minutes later, another call. This time, silence for several seconds then. New people who cause problems do not last long here. Over the next 3 days, I received 7 similar calls. Some were silent. Some contained vague threats. All came from blocked numbers. I reported them to the local sheriff's office, but the deputy who took my statement seemed oddly uninterested. Probably just kids playing pranks, he suggested, not meeting my eyes. Not much we can do about blocked numbers. On Thursday morning, I discovered my mailbox had been knocked off its post. The metal box lay in the ditch, its door hanging open. Across the side, someone had spray-painted the words "Move or Else" in bright red. This time, I took photographs before calling the sheriff's office. The same deputy arrived, glanced at the mailbox, and wrote something in his notebook. Could be random vandalism, he suggested. Lots of bored teenagers in the area. This is not random, I insisted. This is connected to the ongoing trespassing issues. I have video evidence of people from Lakeside Estates removing my signs. The deputy's expression changed slightly. Lakeside Estates, Karen Mitchell's neighborhood. Yes, she has been leading groups across my property despite my clear posting against trespassing. The deputy closed his notebook. Look, I will file a report about the mailbox, but my advice, try to work things out with the HOA. These disputes can drag on for years around here. As he walked back to his patrol car, I called after him. Is Karen Mitchell related to anyone in the sheriff's department? He paused, then turned back with a tight smile. Ma'am, this is a small county. Everyone is related to someone. With that, he drove away. That evening, I sat on my porch watching the sunset through trees that had once brought me peace. The damaged meadow, the muddy creek, the vandalized mailbox, the threatening calls, all of it swirled in my mind. The dream property I had sacrificed everything for was becoming a nightmare. Something hardened inside me. I had tried reasonable approaches. I had attempted polite conversations. I had posted legal notices. I had reported the vandalism and threats. None of it had worked. That night, I called the fence company that had left a brochure in my mailbox weeks earlier. Their website promised secure boundaries for farm and ranch properties. I scheduled a consultation for the following day. Sometimes the only message bullies understand is one they cannot ignore. If Karen and her friends wanted war, they were going to get one. The fence company representative arrived early the next morning. Eric was a weathered man in his 50s who had clearly built fences in all kinds of terrain. He walked the property with me, nodding as I explained the situation. "Not the first time I have dealt with something like this," he said as we stood where the ATV trail crossed my creek. "People get mighty territorial about routes they have been using, even when they have no legal right." I showed him the property survey and the damage to the land. "What would you recommend?" Eric considered the landscape. 6-foot wooden privacy fence would make the strongest statement. We could run it along your entire eastern boundary, or just across the trail if budget is a concern. Just across the trail for now, I decided. And I want it done right, proper concrete footings, quality materials. "It will not be cheap," he warned. "I will worry about that. What I need to know is whether you can do it legally and properly." Eric nodded. "We will file for any necessary permits with the county, everything by the book. I will warn you, though, permit applications are public record. If these folks have the connections you mentioned, they might try to block it." "Let them try," I said with more confidence than I felt. The process moved more quickly than I expected. Eric submitted the permit application the next day. I paid the rush fee to expedite the process. To my surprise, the permit was approved within the week with no complications. Perhaps Karen's influence was not as extensive as I feared, or perhaps she was unaware of what I was planning. I learned from Eric that Karen and many of the HOA board members were away at a regional property development conference. This explained the lack of interference and gave us a perfect window of opportunity. The crew arrived on a Monday morning when ATV traffic was typically light. They worked efficiently, digging post holes and setting the heavy wooden posts in concrete. By Wednesday, the framework was complete. By Friday, the solid wooden panels were installed, creating an unbroken barrier directly across the ATV trail. The fence stood 6 feet tall and stretched for about 60 feet, from a dense thicket on one side to a rocky outcropping on the other. There was no way around it without trespassing even deeper onto my property. We installed solar-powered lights along the top and positioned 2 clearly visible cameras facing both sides. A large sign in the center read, "Private property. No trespassing VIOLATORS will be PROSECUTED." The work was completed just as the weekend approached. I paid the crew their final installment and Eric shook my hand. "Good luck," he said. "Stand your ground. You are in the right here." I spent a tense weekend waiting for the inevitable confrontation. Surprisingly, Saturday passed quietly. A few ATVs approached my property line, saw the fence, and turned back. Word was spreading. Sunday morning was similarly peaceful. Then, late Sunday afternoon, I heard it, the distinctive sound of Karen's ATV approaching at high speed. I stepped onto my porch just as she crested the hill and saw the fence for the first time. She slammed on her brakes, sending up a spray of dirt and gravel. For several long moments, she simply stared at the barrier. Then she removed her helmet and walked toward the fence. Even from a distance, I could see the fury in her posture. I walked down to meet her, stopping a safe distance away on my side of the fence. Up close, her face was flushed with anger, her carefully highlighted hair disheveled from the ride. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, gesturing at the fence as if it were an obscene object. "It is a fence marking my property boundary," I replied calmly, "as is my legal right." "You have no right to block an established community trail," she hissed. "This access route has been used for decades. According to county records and my property survey, there is no legal easement or right-of-way across this land. I have checked thoroughly." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Do you have any idea what you have done? This cuts off access to the lake for our entire community. Property values will plummet. You have single-handedly destroyed years of community development. There is public access to the lake via the county road, I pointed out. It is only an additional 3 miles. 3 miles, she threw her hands up. Our community was sold on the promise of direct trail access. People paid premium prices for those lots. That was not my concern. Then your developer should have secured legal easements before making those promises. Karen's expression shifted from anger to something more calculated. I have already spoken to our attorney. We will sue you for obstructing an implied easement. We will tie you up in court for years. The legal fees alone will bankrupt you. I have consulted with my own attorney, I countered. She believes I am on solid legal ground. Karen let out a harsh laugh. Your attorney? Let me guess, Margaret Simmons. That woman has a personal vendetta against successful developments. No judge in this county will side with her. She stepped closer to the fence, gripping one of the posts and shaking it slightly. This fence is coming down, one way or another. I would not recommend that, I said, pointing to the camera clearly visible on a nearby tree. Any vandalism or destruction of property will be recorded and reported to the authorities. Karen froze, her eyes finding the camera. Her hand dropped from the fence post. The transformation was immediate, from unbridled fury to cold, calculating anger. You have no idea what you have started, she said quietly. This community takes care of its own, and you are not one of us. You have just declared war on the wrong people. She returned to her ATV, started the engine with an aggressive rev, and turned back the way she had come. As she drove away, she called over her shoulder, "Enjoy your solitude while it lasts." I remained by the fence long after she disappeared, my momentary victory already souring into uncertainty about what would come next. The battle lines had been drawn, but the war was far from over. The retaliation began the very next morning. A courier delivered a certified letter bearing the letterhead of Winters and Associates, attorneys at law. Inside was a formal notice stating that Lakeside Estates Homeowners Association was filing suit against me for illegal obstruction of an established easement by prescription, and seeking an emergency injunction to have my fence removed immediately. The legal language was intimidating, filled with citations of obscure precedents and threats of significant financial penalties. They claimed my actions had caused irreparable harm to property values and disrupted the peaceful enjoyment of Lakeside Estates residents. The letter demanded that I remove the fence within 48 hours or face legal consequences. I immediately forwarded the letter to Margaret, who called me within the hour. "This is mostly bluster," she assured me. "Gerald Winters is Karen's cousin by marriage, and his firm handles all the HOA's legal matters. They are trying to scare you into removing the fence before we can properly respond." "Will they get their injunction?" I asked. "Unlikely. The burden of proof for an emergency injunction is high. They would need to demonstrate immediate and irreparable harm, and the existence of an alternative route to the lake weakens their claim considerably." Margaret's confidence bolstered my resolve, but the HOA's campaign was just beginning. Over the next few days, it became clear that Karen had mobilized her full network against me. My neighbors, the few I had met since moving in, suddenly became distant. One elderly couple who had previously brought me homemade preserves admitted that they had received a letter from the HOA warning about supporting disruptive elements in the community. Then came the regulatory assault. A county environmental inspector arrived unannounced to investigate an anonymous complaint about illegal modifications to a watershed. He spent hours examining the creek crossing, taking photographs and soil samples. Someone reported that you have been dumping chemicals that are contaminating the watershed, he explained when I questioned him. That is completely false, I protested. The only damage to the creek has been caused by ATV traffic. The inspector nodded noncommittally. I have to follow up on all reports. You will receive my findings in the mail. 2 days later, another inspector arrived to check my septic system based on another anonymous complaint. The day after that, an animal control officer responded to a report of exotic animals being kept without proper permits. Each inspection found nothing improper, but the constant intrusions were taking a toll. I felt under siege in my own home, jumping at every vehicle that approached my driveway. The most devastating blow came when my water stopped running. Investigation revealed that my well pump had been damaged. The repair technician shook his head as he examined the equipment. Someone tampered with this, he said, pointing to clear-cut marks on the wiring. This did not happen by accident. The repair cost nearly $2,000, money I had not budgeted for. As I wrote the check, I wondered how long I could withstand this campaign of harassment. The local newspaper added another dimension to my troubles. A front-page article titled "Property Dispute Disrupts Community Access" quoted Karen extensively about how my fence had divided the community and ended decades of harmonious shared access to natural resources. The article mentioned my name and the approximate location of my property. The reporter had attempted to contact me for comment, leaving a single voicemail while I was dealing with the well repair. My perspective was represented by a brief line stating that the property owner declined to comment. The response from the community was immediate. I began receiving angry letters from people I had never met, accusing me of selfishness and disregard for local traditions. Someone left a crude sign at the end of my driveway that read, "City People Go Home." Through it all, I documented everything. I photographed each inspector's visit, recorded the dates and times of every incident, kept copies of all letters and newspaper articles, and downloaded the footage from my security cameras daily. My evidence folder grew thicker by the day. Margaret reviewed my documentation with grim satisfaction. "They do not realize they are building our case for us," she said. "This pattern of coordinated harassment following your legal exercise of property rights is exactly what we need." I wanted to share her confidence, but the weight of being targeted by what felt like an entire community was crushing. Each day brought some new challenge or intrusion. The peaceful retreat I had worked so hard to create had become a battleground. Yet something in me refused to surrender. This land represented everything I had sacrificed and worked for. If I gave in to bullying and intimidation, what message would that send? Some principles were worth fighting for, even at great personal cost. The question was how much more I could endure before reaching my breaking point. The turning point came unexpectedly. One of the county inspectors who had visited my property, a young woman from the Water Resources Department, contacted me privately. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice low even over the phone. "The complaints against your property are not coming through normal channels. They are being fast-tracked by Commissioner Mitchell directly to department heads." Commissioner Mitchell, Karen's husband. The connection was now explicit. "Is that unusual?" I asked. "It is completely improper," she replied. "I have documentation showing at least 5 different complaints originated from the same source, but were filed under different names to make them appear unrelated. I cannot be publicly involved, but I thought you should know. This was the evidence we needed. Margaret filed a countersuit the next day, alleging harassment, malicious prosecution, defamation, and conspiracy to violate my civil rights. The filing named Karen personally, along with the HOA board and Commissioner Mitchell. The suit detailed every incident: the trespassing, the sign removal, the threatening calls, the vandalized mailbox, the damaged well pump, the coordinated inspections, all supported by photographs, video evidence, and now internal county documents provided anonymously. The countersuit had an immediate effect. The inspection stopped. The HOA's emergency injunction hearing was postponed as their attorney requested time to review our allegations. 2 weeks later, we received a settlement offer from the HOA's attorney. They would drop their easement claim if we would drop our countersuit. No money would change hands. "They are running scared," Margaret observed. "But this offer admits no wrongdoing. I think we should press forward." I agreed. If we settled now, nothing would prevent them from trying similar tactics against someone else in the future. The case was assigned to Judge Elena Ramos, recently appointed from outside the county and known for her strict adherence to legal precedent. During the preliminary hearing, she reviewed the property survey and original deeds with careful attention. "There is no recorded easement on this property," she stated flatly. "Furthermore, the requirements for an easement by prescription have not been met. The fence appears to be entirely within the plaintiff's property boundaries." When presented with the evidence of coordinated harassment, Judge Ramos's expression darkened. She ordered an independent investigation into the county inspection process and the alleged misuse of government resources. The investigation uncovered emails between Karen and various county officials, including her husband, explicitly discussing ways to apply pressure, to force me to cooperate with community needs. Most damning was an email from Karen to the HOA board outlining a strategy to make ownership so painful that selling becomes the only option. The fallout was swift. Commissioner Mitchell recused himself from all property matters and later announced he would not seek re-election. 3 other county employees received disciplinary actions for improper handling of complaints. The HOA board, facing potential personal liability, held an emergency meeting. Karen was asked to resign as president amid questions about HOA funds used for personal legal matters. The HOA's lawsuit against me was withdrawn with prejudice. In the aftermath, neighboring properties began posting their own boundary markers. Others who had suffered similar intimidation tactics came forward, creating a support network for protecting property rights in the county. The fence remained standing, a monument to standing one's ground. The ATV traffic has found other routes, leaving the creek to recover its clarity. Birds have returned to the meadow, and the only tracks through the tall grass are my own. Some battles must be fought not just for yourself, but for everyone who might come after you. This land, finally and truly, is mine.